Story time about how I fell in love with my stepdad and married him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I repeat, this is not my story time. My mom and dad divorced when I was 14 years old. This really affected me and I really wanted to move away from my parents. My mom has a tendency to be really controlling and my dad has always been like a really jealous dad. Like he never let me do anything fun or even let me hang out with boys. After they got divorced, I told my parents that I wanted to go to an art school. But not just any art school, this was a boarding school. I was really eager to get away from my parents and just basically have my own life. While I was in this art school, my mom actually remarried. So this guy became my stepdad. My mom told me that she was really in love with him and that everything was perfect. They would come visit me every now and then, so I did meet him a couple of times. Finally, when I was 18, I graduated and went back home. This is where things get really complicated. My mom owned 2 salons and was never home. My stepdad worked from home and was there all day. This meant that I had to spend a lot of time with him. Every now and then, he would ask me to go to dinner and to the movies, just like hang out. And before I knew it, I was developing feelings. Let me remind you again that I was 18. I knew that this was really bad. I mean, this was my mom's husband. But there was something about him I really liked. That's when he started opening up to me about how controlling my mom was in the relationship and how he was actually thinking of leaving her. Now, trust me, when he told me this, I was like, oh my God. But that's when I realized that he probably liked me too. I mean, we hung out all the time. And the vibes were there. I knew I had to get away, so I decided to go study abroad. But my stepdad and I kept in touch. He would email me and text me all the time. And before I knew it, we were talking every single day. One day I get a message from him saying that he caught my mom cheating. Now, honestly, this didn't surprise me because that's why my mom's relationship with my dad ended. He asked me to come home and I did. And when I saw him again, I realized that I actually was falling in love with him. Part 2 is that's when I realized that I had fallen in love with my stepdad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I repeat, this is not my story time. At this point, I was 18 years old. He asked me to come home because he found out that my mom was cheating on him. He asked my mom for the divorce and she said yes. Apparently, my mom was actually going to move in with the guy that she was cheating on my stepdad with, which is a whole other story. My stepdad seemed brokenhearted, but at the same time really relieved. And because of this, we actually started spending more and more time together. Once the dust had settled, I decided to go back to school, which was in another country. And the whole time, my ex-stepdad and I kept in contact. We would talk on the phone almost every single day. Finally, when him and my mom were officially divorced, he actually started changing with me. He started going to the gym and even bought himself a new car. Oh yeah, and he got himself a condo. He started sending me selfies of him in the mirror and showing off his abs and stuff like that. At first, I was like, maybe this is innocent, but then I realized that he was definitely flirting with me. On my 20th birthday, I decided to go home and visit my mom. And yes, I knew that I would be seeing my stepdad. My mom and I had dinner and she told me that my stepdad was actually seeing other women. And this made me extremely jealous. My mom noticed it and asked me if I was upset. I said no, but she kept prying. Finally, I confessed to my own mother that I was in love with her ex-husband. Being the drama queen that my mother is, she instantly started to cry and told me that I was trying to ruin her life. She got up from the table and ran out of the restaurant. After that, my mom did not want to take my phone calls. So instead, I went over to my ex-stepdad's house, and I decided to just come out and tell him everything I felt about him. When I finished talking, he actually smiled and hugged me. He told me to just ignore my mom and that everything was going to be fine. He instantly made me feel so much better. And then he told me that he actually had feelings for me too. I mean, I was so happy, but at the same time, I knew that I couldn't be with him because of my mom. I also mentioned to him that my mom said that he was dating a bunch of other women, and he told me that he had been going out on some dates, but that he only ever thought of me. He then asked me if I wanted to give our relationship a shot. I didn't know what else to say except yes, because I was so happy. Then we became boyfriend and girlfriend secretly, part 3. So my ex-stepdad and I began a secret relationship. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I repeat, this is not my story time. At this point, I was 19 years old, and my ex-stepdad was 47. Since my mom was not speaking to me, I decided to send her an email. And I explained to her that I had every intention to date my ex-stepdad. Finally, a few months later, she called me back. Mind you, my mom had cheated on my ex-stepdad and that's why they got divorced. And she told me that she would accept the relationship. Then out of nowhere, she told me that I should start planning my wedding. Mind you, I had only been dating my ex-stepdad for a little bit. It feels weird calling him my ex-stepdad, so now I'll just call him my boyfriend. Now the problem is I get judgment from my entire family. My aunts and uncles hate my boyfriend, and I'm pretty sure my mom has been telling them that he's actually a cheater when she was the one that cheated. It's been 2 years now and I'm still with my boyfriend. But he recently asked me if I was open to getting married and I said yes. Now the problem is I don't know what to do about it. We discussed it at length and I basically told him that I think we should elope. He tells me that I'll regret it and that I should have my family there, but I know they hate him. I mean, it is a very weird situation, but they don't understand that I didn't grow up with him. I didn't meet him until I was 18 years old. When my mom found out that we were going to get married, she actually started planning the wedding without my consent. She even tried to pick out my wedding dress and the cake. So 2 weeks ago, my boyfriend and I actually eloped. We're married and literally nobody in my family knows. My mom still thinks she's planning the wedding, and I just don't know how to break it to her that there is no wedding. Should I keep the secret or should I tell my family? I really need help here.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you about how Cody proposed to me and just the whole weekend. So yeah, Cody proposed to me on November 20th, and I hid it for a few days so I could tell my family and friends first. Also, just so I could enjoy the moment offline, I wasn't on my phone for like 3-4 days. So like I said, the night before, Cody told me to pack a suitcase for 3 days. So that's exactly what I did. He told me nothing else, gave me no additional details. He just said, pack a suitcase for 3 days, we're going somewhere. He also said, dress nice. So I dressed nice. So we hop in the car, he put something on the GPS, and we end up arriving at Mandarin Oriental Hotel, which is a very nice hotel in Boston, and it was actually the first hotel we stayed at our first date in Boston. So super sweet. We get to the hotel room and he gets us this probably the most expensive room in the freaking hotel. It was like massive and it looked like a freaking apartment. It was beautiful. There was some white roses on the table he had gifted me and some, a nice like fruit tray. It was very romantic. And then he's like, all right, we gotta go for a walk. And I'm like, okay, let's go. So I'm not asking any questions. I'm just kind of going with it, right? So we walk to the Boston Commons, the public garden, which is the place we had our first date at in Boston. And so it was very sweet of him to want to like recreate that moment. Cody knows me so well that he literally knew that would be exactly what I wanted. So then we sit down at the same bench that we sat at that first date. I could not believe he remembered the bench. And he starts just right away giving this beautiful freaking speech. Oh my God, it was so sweet. He's an angel. It's such a beautiful day. He gets on one knee. I'm holding his hand because I'm so nervous for him. And then he, of course, asks me to marry him. And I absolutely said yes. And then photographers literally pop out of the trees and they're capturing the moment. And then we did a 2-hour photo shoot, and that's what those photos were. He planned this all himself. Then he took me to a restaurant called Abe and Louie's. It's a very fancy steakhouse in Boston. And we had the most beautiful, wonderful evening and dinner. But it was a 3-day trip, so it wasn't over yet. Next day, he books us a 2-hour spa treatment and massage. And I'm like, damn, this boy knows what he's doing. Then after the spa, we just got to relax for a little bit and get ready for dinner again. We went to this incredible restaurant. I loved it. It was really awesome. It was very fancy. Then the next day, we went on a duck tour, which he's from Nevada, so he's never been on one. He doesn't know shit about Boston, so we loved that. It was so fun. And then he wanted me to feel so special. He took me to Dior. I got literally the most beautiful Dior bag I've ever seen. And now I'm Cody's fiance.
Story time about how I faked a pregnancy to get my boyfriend to marry me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Okay, this is super embarrassing and I did get in trouble for this, so strap in. He's now my ex because of course he dumped my ass. He and I met in college and we were totally in love. We spent every single day together and we moved in together really fast. We even stopped going to parties just to be together. About 3 years into the relationship, I told him that I definitely wanted to get married. He told me that he just wasn't ready. Then everything got really bad. He became really cold towards me. When I confronted him about it, he was honest and he told me that he just didn't love me anymore. Then he moved out and literally cut me out of his life. Even his parents told me to leave him alone. So there's a pregnant girl working at the coffee shop I usually go to. I paid her $600 to pee on a pregnancy stick. I knew this was the only way I was going to get him to marry me. I show up to my boyfriend's house, but guess who's there? He's with his ex-girlfriend sitting on the couch watching a movie. That's when I willed myself to cry and I show him the pregnancy test. Part 2 is up. So I show my ex the fake pregnancy test so that he can marry me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Mind you, his ex is sitting on the couch waiting for him to come back so that they can finish watching their stupid movie. And when he saw that the test was positive, he started to cry. I told him that we had to talk and he told his ex to leave. Then he tells his parents to come into the room and his mom also started to cry when she saw the pregnancy test. I couldn't really tell if they were happy tears or if they were like, oh no tears. That's when I told him that I fully expected him to ask me to marry him. I even told him that I was 2 months along so we could start planning the wedding. That's when he told his parents that I was right. Then he asked me to marry him. I knew that I got what I wanted, but I had no idea how I was going to fake this pregnancy. A few days later, he moved back into our apartment. He started painting the guest room so that it could be the nursery. But here's the worst part. A month later, I was still not able to get pregnant. I didn't know what to do, so I started eating a lot of food to fake the pregnancy bump. I would eat McDonald's for breakfast and Taco Bell for dinner. Part 3 is up. In order to fake the pregnancy, I had to gain weight. So I started eating tons of food. I would have pizza every other day. I ate 2 pints of ice cream a day. And every time I passed by a fast food place, I would pick up something to eat. I was gaining a little bit of weight, so people believed me when I said I was pregnant. Finally, the wedding came around. I was so relieved once we were married because I knew I had to eventually go to the doctor. And I had decided that once the doctor said that I wasn't pregnant, I would put on a show and pretend that I just lost the baby. Well, when it finally happened, my husband straight up asked me if I made it all up. And I told him yes. It literally took him 1 hour to move out of the apartment. He went straight to get a restraining order, and my parents sent me to a psychiatrist. But you see, we're still married. He hasn't filed for divorce, so
Story time about the scariest night of my life. A lot of background information. So the one weekend, my sister and I decided that we were going to go to my stepdad's, and her best friend was going to come also. I was around 13 at the time. Well, my stepdad and my mom had been broken up for about a few months, but my dad was okay with us going to our stepdad's because he had been with our mom for around 7 years and he's always been good to us. And my stepdad's was 2 hours away. So fast forward, we get to his house, and my sister and her friend wanted to go to a party. Now, me being older now, I knew that they didn't want to bring me because they were around 16 and I was only 13, but I still tried to tag along. Well, they weren't really talking to me or anything, and I hadn't seen my mom in almost a year. So I told my stepdad that I wanted to go and see her, which was a super big deal because she absolutely hated my stepdad. And she didn't want him around us. And by the way, she lived like 5 minutes from him. So if she found out that we went all the way up there to see him and not her, she would have flipped. So he drives me to my mom's house, like for part 2. Part 2 about the worst night of my life. So before I got to my mom's house, I called her. And I pretty much just told her that I was with my stepdad and I wanted to come see her. Like I said, she lived 5 minutes away. So as soon as we pull up, she walks outside. And she starts screaming at my stepdad. She's like, "Those are my kids. You're not allowed to see them, blah, blah, blah." Even though my dad had full custody and he could decide who we could and couldn't see. So after that, we walk in the house. She isn't saying anything. And this house is pretty much like a trap house. There was a knife holding the door shut. Not a kitchen knife, like an actual knife that you stab people with. She's like, "You can sit down, make yourself comfortable." And I didn't want to sit down because I saw needles everywhere and I just saw a rat crawl under the couch. So I was like, "No, I'm fine." And then she was like, "Sorry, not everybody can be rich like you." Which, just to make clear, I'm not rich. I just knew that she was doing drugs with her boyfriend in that house. After that, she pulls the knife that was holding the door shut out and points it right at me, like for part 3. Part 3 about the worst night of my life. So before she points the knife at me, she had been in the kitchen, right? So I went to go and sneak out the door. That's whenever she ran over, ripped the knife out of the door, and pointed it right at me. And she's like screaming a bunch of shit at me. And she's like, "Oh, what, are you gonna tell your dad that I pointed a knife at you?" And I told her, "Yeah, like, what the fuck do you mean? Am I not gonna tell him?" So at this point, she tries to take my phone. I told her, "No, you're not taking my phone." And at this time, my sister's also texting me and yelling at me because she had told me that I should not go to my mom's house. Probably for that exact reason. A few minutes later, she hears her boyfriend pull up. I had never met her boyfriend. Like I said, I haven't seen her in probably almost a year. As soon as she hears him pull up, she looks at me and she says, "Go out the back door." She literally hurries up, takes me to the back door, and I have to run out the back door. I don't even know where I am. My sister and stepdad were waiting at the gas station across the street, so I ran over there really quickly. And then a few things happened after that. Let me know if you guys want a part 4. Part 4 about the worst night of my life. Just a little side note, I am in bed, so it's going to be a black screen, and you can probably hear my dog snoring. I'm just going to go from my point of view the rest of the time because I texted my sister, but I think she's sleeping. So pretty much I had to call my sister after my mom told her to go out the back door. And there was a Sheetz right across from where she was. But since she had to go out the back, she just saw like all woods and no gas station. So I got on the phone with her. She runs over to the gas station. And when we get back to my stepdad's house, we call our dad and let him know what happened. And the police actually got involved. And they had called my dad because my mom had called them and told him a bunch of stuff that just wasn't true. Like saying that my stepdad was a pedophile and stuff, just like saying stuff that could actually ruin this man's life. And usually my stepdad would come pick us up and then drop us back off. But the police said that my dad had to come get us tomorrow morning, even though he had full custody and could decide who we could go with and stuff. So my dad came the next day and picked us up.
Story time on how my babysitter used a teddy bear to spy on me while I changed. Okay, so boom, my parents worked a lot and they both worked night shifts. My dad would come home first at like 11 p.m. and then my mom would usually come around 1 a.m. My parents didn't want me to be home alone for too long, so I would have a babysitter from 3 when I would get off of school till 11 when my dad came home. By the way, I'm 12 and the babysitter that we're going to be talking about is 19. So I usually stayed with my older cousin till my dad came home, but my cousin and her family moved. So my parents were forced to get me an actual babysitter. So like a week into me dealing with this new babysitter, one night I was changing and my babysitter tried to open the door, but it was locked. I told her that I was changing, but she told me that I have to leave my door unlocked just in case something happened. happens. I only believed her because my parents had a similar rule. But eventually, my babysitter was always walking into me accidentally while I changed. I was getting annoyed, so I had to think of something to stop her. Yeah, I'm running out of time. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how my babysitter used a teddy bear to spy on me while I changed. Okay, so boom, like I said, my babysitter kept accidentally walking in on me while I was changing. So to stop her, after I would get out the shower, I would literally go to her and say, hey, I'm in my room changing. I'll be right back. Please don't come in. So she had no choice but to stop accidentally seeing me. Well, that stopped her for a week, and then she got me a teddy bear. I was excited because it was a pretty big bear and it was super soft. She came in my room with me and said she got the perfect spot for the bear. And I was like, okay, cool. Y'all, she put it right on my dresser, front and center, great view to see everything. And ever since then, she never came back into my room. Y'all, the things I did in my room, like dancing with no clothes on, acting like I was Beyonce on stage, shaking my little booty with barely any clothes on. And little did I know she was downstairs watching the whole thing, cause the camera was in the teddy bear's eyes. Like for part 3. Part 3 on how my babysitter used the teddy bear to spy on me while I changed. Okay, so boom, like I said, she gave me a teddy bear with camera eyes and put it on my dresser. I, of course, didn't notice that there was actually cameras in the eyes of the teddy bear. Well, one day my mom was cleaning my room and she asked me where did I get this bear from? And I told her that my babysitter got it for me. And my mom was like, oh, okay. For some reason, my mom was creeped out about the bear and she ended up putting it in the washroom to clean it later. That same night, before I even got a hello, my babysitter said, why'd you move the bear? And I looked at her and said, how did you even know the bear was moved? She kind of stumbled on her words, but then she told me that my mom told her. I obviously fell for it and was like, oh yeah, she put it in the washroom to clean later. Y'all, my babysitter went to the washroom and took the bear and she placed it back on the dresser at the same spot. And she told me to tell my mom that we washed the bear together. I really didn't care, so I was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I went about my day. This is where it gets real. Like for part 4. Part 4 on how my babysitter used the teddy bear to spy on me while I changed. Okay, so boom, like I said, after my mom moved the teddy bear, my babysitter went in and moved it back. The next day, it was Saturday, so my mom was off. My mom came in my room and saw the teddy bear and asked me why I brought it back up. So I said, honestly, Mom, the babysitter put it back up. She was so sad that she moved it. You should have never even told her. And my mom just looked at me confused and was like, what do you mean? I didn't tell her I moved the bear. And I said, of course you did, Mom. You probably just forgot. Because before she even walked through those doors, she asked me why I moved the bear. My mom's eyes opened wide and she froze. My mom took her phone out and opened a flash and shined it into the bear's eyes. And then she screamed, oh my gosh, and then grabbed the teddy bear and ran to her room. There the camera was. My mom called the cops and then the cops went to my babysitter's house like 15 minutes away. And my babysitter's parents, not knowing what's going on, let the cops in. Y'all, like for part 5.
My dad passed away when I was 23, but he left me a great fortune. It's this little sandstone carved angel. I was coming out of a very difficult time in my life and just started to get better when my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Through it all, he never lost hope, not in the sense that he thought he was going to be healed, but in the sense of no matter what was being presented to him, he found the good. He'd be going through a difficult treatment or have a painful surgery, and I'd come and visit him and I'd say, how are you? He'd acknowledge the reality. He'd say, I'm in pain, or I'm feeling nauseous, or I'm feeling dizzy. But then he'd stop and think and he'd say, you know, I had a really great milkshake today. Or the nurse that's taking care of me today, she is hilarious. She's told me 5 jokes that have cracked me up. After my dad passed, my mom handed me an envelope with my name on it. And she said, I found this in one of your dad's dresser drawers. It's for you. Inside was this little carved sandstone angel. I've had it since I was 23. And there was a note from my dad, and it simply said, let this small angel remind you of the small moments of beauty, even in the big moments of despair. And before any of you go all 2021 on me and start talking about toxic positivity, that's not what this is. This is not about not acknowledging what you're going through or ignoring the fact that you're suffering or in pain. This is merely about acknowledging that and then trying to become stronger or working through it by finding some ways to find hope or to find good or to find happiness or to find joy, even in those difficult moments. I've been through poverty. I've been through abuse. I've been through neglect. I've been through cancer. I've been through those things. I get it. But if you're sinking in a gigantic hole of quicksand and someone holds out a small stick for you to grab onto to save your life, don't you grab onto it? What's toxic about that? As I record this, today is Thanksgiving, and it's going to be a different Thanksgiving for me. You see, I lost my mom at the beginning of October. When she was in and out of consciousness about 2 days before she passed away, suddenly she opened up her eyes and she looked at me and she said, "Do you still have the angel?" I knew what she was talking about and I said, "Yes, I do." She smiled at me and she just said, "He meant it." Am I going to feel a little sad today because this is the first Thanksgiving without my mom? 100% I will, but I will remember this. In our times of suffering or despair or loss, it's not easy to find the good. Easier said than done, right? Pretty much everything is easier said than done. That's not a revelation. It also doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to still do it. No matter what you're going through, I hope you're able to find your little angel in those moments. As my mom reminded me, he meant it.